Sounds like we have ourselves a new starter. We'll talk about it all next. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And tonight, it is the weekly edition with my guy, So Real Suneil. Make sure you tap into his channel if you have not done so already. The link is in the description. You look, what are you about to blast off in that NASA thing? What's going on over
We
there?
out of this world, baby. We out of this world.
Holy, geez, he's an astronaut, this guy. He wears mini hats, or should I say mini hoodies.
Yo,
All
I
right, brother.
was telling Jack just earlier, whenever I wear a polo or a button down, I'm always top button gang. Guess who else is
I
top
got you.
button gang? Shanahan's top button gang. So I'm back to being a Shanahan stan because top button gang stick together. Gang, gang.
Yeah, I guess. All right. Well, I'm actually a fan of Shanahan today. I think he said a lot today at the presser that he had at the what was it, the owner meetings, the league meetings, what have you. And there's a lot to dive into. So let's just start with that. Let's see where that takes us. And then we do have a few other topics that we may or may not get to, depending on what time looks like. But let me add this to the stream, my guy. All right. Let's check this out. There we go. All right. So the first thing that he talked about, or that I want to talk about, that he talked about, was Javon Kinlaw. He was asked about Javon Kinlaw, and he says, I see Kinlaw every day working outside my window. It's like, what is he, a window washer? That's weird. Shanahan said Tuesday at the owner meetings, this is the healthiest that I've seen him since he's been here, and I really think that he's fixed some of the things that were issues, and I am excited for him. I'm as excited for him as anyone. Geez, English is tough for me right now. I apologize. But basically, he's saying he's as healthy as he's ever been. He's super excited for him to get out on the field, see what it looks like. This coincides, and I don't know if you saw the interview of Kinlaw on Brad's channel. It was a hell of an interview if you haven't checked it out. But he talked about that. He talked about how this is the healthiest he's ever been. He's never had this much flexibility in his legs, his hips, his knees, and he feels amazing right now. What did you take away from this quote from Shanahan?
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest thing is when it comes to Shanahan, he's not that big of a gaslighter. Like, he is pretty honest and blunt, and he doesn't do too well with, he's not going to say something and it be the complete opposite. And when you couple this with what was being said last year about Kinlaw, people were saying, or Shanahan and Lynch were talking about, his knee isn't coming along the way that we thought it would be. They kept talking, kind of letting us know that he's not going to play, or he's not going to, they're not necessarily depending on him to play last season. So the fact that now all of a sudden it's very much positive news about him, like best shape of his life. Like, now they're hyping it up to be like, yo, we're going to see Kinlaw. And then, Kinlaw, I haven't seen the interview with Brad, but I have seen him post on his social media about, don't judge me until I'm healthy. That mixed in with these defensive linemen, usually in their third year, Jesse, you've mentioned this, that's when they kind of pop off. So the fact that it's his third year in the system, it's the healthiest he's been, he has something to prove. I believe that this is going to be a lot of great news, especially with DJ Jones leaving in free agency. To have a healthy Kinlaw motivated to come in there and take over that position, it's best case scenario for the 49ers, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, a healthy Kinlaw is exactly what we need to see, and we haven't seen it. I mean, this guy has gotten no training camp work for the first 2 years he's been in the league. First year, it was COVID, a little bit of knee stuff. Second year, it was all knee. It swelled up on him on the flight back to training camp, or mini camp rather. And he just was never healthy, right? And even then, you still see some flashes. An extremely powerful, explosive man. If he's fully healthy, I think that's great news for the 49ers. Now, I'm on record of saying that I think that there is something more serious. I felt like that the knee is arthritic, which, by the way, you can get cleaned out. They're not saying that. They're never going to say that. But I know that a big man with knee issues usually leads to arthritis. So that's a speculation I'm making based off of personal experience, based off of what I've seen others go through. A Portland Trailblazer fan, I've seen the worst of the worst when it comes to knee injuries with Greg Oden and Brandon Roy. And so that's where my mind went with Kinlaw. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope that this man comes back healthy. He's a hard person not to root for, right? You're talking about somebody who was living out of his car. Just to get to the NFL is like a feel good story already. You can already see like it's a Channel 10 movie waiting to happen, but
Right.
we want to see the great outcome. Like we want to see this guy be dominant. And unfortunately, thus far, he hasn't been healthy enough to do that. And he's constantly being compared to Buckner, which is never a fun thing, right? But that's
Right.
just the way that it's going to be. It's always going to be that way. I do genuinely believe that Kinlaw is a hell of a player, can be a hell of a player. I was hoping the 49ers would draft him. I was happy that they drafted him. And I just want to see him show out and do well and get paid and just have a great career. I'm rooting for the kid. I really am. It's hard not to be worried based off of what we've already seen. And yes, you're in great shape now. Yes, you are healthy now. But I also remember last year when I was talking about the arthritis thing, people are like, well, he's on his Instagram talking about how healthy he is. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, of course, that's what he's going to say. You can say what you want, but the kid's not practicing. Knees don't just swell up on flights. I'm sorry. That's not a normal thing. That's not what happens to knees. So once that happened, it was a red flag for me. And, it lingered until he was done for the season. So I say all that to basically ultimately say I'm rooting for the kid. Kinlaw, stay healthy, show out, bring something great to this team. And I think he can be an X factor for this defensive line. I really do.
Yeah, and the one thing that's different about this situation, Kinlaw might have been saying those things. Shanahan and Lynch weren't saying those things. And now at least Shanahan is saying positive things, like he looks healthy, stuff like that. That is what I buy into more than what Kinlaw says. Even though it is nice to hear Kinlaw kind of take a shot at everybody who's doubting him and be like, judge me when I'm healthy. Well, that's a lot. That's some big words to speak about. He's going to get every chance to show people what he's about this season.
Baymac wants to know if it's a Trey or a Jimmy channel. It's a 49er channel. It's 49ers / Lions. My co-host, my weekly co-host on Thursdays. He's the other half of the channel. He runs the Lions side of things. I run the 49er side of things. I'm pro Trey. If that answers your question, Trey should be starting. I don't know. Does that help? Maybe not. All right, let's get to this next comment. And it's talking about the other side of the trenches and what the plan is at guard. And basically, Shanahan said, if you had to ask me halfway through the season if he was going to play, he's talking about Banks, by the way, I would have said yes. And then things started to click for our team, and we didn't want to mess it up, but he's ready to go. He also talked about, and I couldn't find the quote or the video, so I didn't put it in, but he also talked about Jalen Moore and talked about how he's going to be competing for a starting spot at guard, which, by the way, that's what he was always here to do. I know he played a little bit at tackle and people thought, oh, this kid's a tackle. He's not that. After the draft last year, Shanahan said that he was drafted to play guard. So, yes, I expect both of them to compete for the starting guard spots. It sounds like they're high on Banks. What are your thoughts with this quote, and what are your thoughts overall on the Banks situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best news for Banks is that Alex Mack is coming back, because you're going to be sandwiched between Alex Mack and Trent Williams. You're going to have the best opportunity to be successful. I think, what was, I guess, upsetting about Banks was, his injury, and then he didn't look the best in training camp. However, they moved him from his natural position to out of his natural position. And from what I've read about guards and things of that nature, like switching from the right to the left side is very difficult for most players. Like, you have to be a very elite type player to be able to go from the right side to the left side seamlessly. And I don't think necessarily it's a knock on him, or it's saying that he's not going to be a good player in the league because he's not good at playing right guard. He's a left guard. He's always played left guard. Maybe in his mind, it doesn't make sense going from, one side to the other. And I'm not going to hold that against him. I do believe, you put up a comment from Rohan Chakravarti, our guy over there who's doing great work. Make sure you go subscribe to him. But
he's in the chat, by the way.
Yeah. So he put that's why I'm saying you put up his comment. He tweeted out earlier that, the like Shanahan and the 49ers are much higher on the guys that they drafted in the offensive line in Banks and Moore than the fan base is. And they're seeing him in practice every single day. And obviously they use draft picks to get these guys, and they haven't made any crazy moves as far as the offensive line to bring guys in, bring some veterans in, even though, Jesse, there are quite a bit of options out there still to bring in some veterans and some guys that could actually compete for starting positions on this offensive line. They've chose not to make those moves. And, I trust in this regime. And if they're seeing something out of the guys that they're like, we don't need to bring guys in. We do know that this team isn't shy about making trades and bringing guys in from other teams to make this offensive line good. The fact that they're not doing that, maybe they're seeing something out of these guys and they feel comfortable starting these guys. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, first, let me get back to this one. Baymax says, sounds like a trade channel. I don't know what that means.
Yes, it's a trade channel, Bay.
I would think, yeah, you should subscribe. I would think that you, as a 49er fan, assuming you're a 49er fan, if you're in here, that you would want to root for the guy who should hopefully be our quarterback for the next 10 plus years. Right? Like, all right, maybe not, whatever. Anyways, yeah, as far as the Banks thing goes, this has kind of been my point is I expected that Tomlinson would get anywhere from 12 to 14 million a year, right? And that's right where he landed, was just under 14. And so once we knew that was the number, we knew that he wasn't coming back. He just wasn't. And people are freaking out about the offensive line, understandably so. We still didn't know. We got some clarification yesterday and today on Mac, but we didn't know what the deal was with Mac. We didn't know if he would be back. It sounds like he is. Obviously, we don't know for sure on McGlinchey. It doesn't sound like the 49ers know for sure on McGlinchey. So there are some question marks. Losing a Pro Bowl caliber left guard is never ideal. I understand that. But the 49ers, whether we agree with it or not, they obviously do believe in Banks. Now, we sit here and say, well, he was a second-round pick outside of a backup quarterback or a third-string quarterback in Kyle Trask, who sat behind the GOAT all year. Banks is the only other guy that got less playing time, basically, out of the second rounders, which is true. And it can be worrisome, right? There were weeks where he couldn't even suit up. Yes, that is a worry. That being said, the 49ers clearly see something and saw things that we never did. They're comfortable. They're confident. And let's not forget that he was a left guard. He was asked to play right guard. So imagine, that sounds easy when you talk about it, but if you're right-handed and I ask you to write left-handed, it's still writing. Why can't you write coherent, legible sentences? Well, that's because it's your offhand, or vice versa. If you're left-handed, writing right-handed. That's what it's like to move from one side of the line to the other. That's what I've always heard from offensive linemen. They've always said moving from one side to the other is like writing with your opposite hand. Sure, it's writing, but it's completely different. And so to ask him to lose weight to fit your scheme and play a position he's never played, that's tough. And I can imagine why it wouldn't have worked out for him. Now, I would also imagine that he's slated to play left guard this year. which is his natural position. As the chat's saying, he's in much better shape, right? And all of those things are great. So we have to see what our assets are. We have to see. We had to let DJ Jones go to see if Kinlaw is anything. We had to let Tomlinson go to see if Banks is anything. You don't spend first and second round picks on guys and not figure out if they're any good. You've got to, right? Now, there are going to be other options if he doesn't work out. Maybe more works out. Maybe it's Brunskill, what have you. Maybe they draft a center / guard to compete also. I don't know. But I feel better about the offensive line than most. It doesn't mean I'm not concerned. I certainly am. But I'm not panicked in the way that other people are.
Yeah, and I mean, it also is another feather in the hat of the team and the way that they've built this team that you can one thing about this last year's draft is they were foreseeing some stuff to be able to stay flexible where they didn't have to be desperate. Like they didn't have to be desperate to sign Lakin back at big money because they've spent good asset in a guy that played left guard at a high level for Notre Dame that they were able to slot in. You know, DJ Jones became somebody that they didn't have to be desperate for because a couple years before that, they had drafted a defensive, the same position in Kinlaw, who can now slot in and be that. Now, does that necessarily mean they are the solutions? Who knows? We'll find out next season. However, the fact that they're planning ahead, I think is a good sign. And I think that goes back to just Lynch and Shanahan and this whole this whole front office for the 49ers. It's just, they're a lot better than I think the fan base gives them credit for. And these are some of the options because they don't have to be desperate in the draft right now. Like you said, they could bring in a guy to compete, but they don't need to bring in a guy and swing for the fences and hit because they have guys already slotted in that could play that position.
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph has a great question here. He says, if the 49ers trade into the first round, what position will it be for? What do you think?
Edge. That's all they pick in the first round.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Yeah. I would say either edge or safety would be my guess.
Right.
But yeah, I think edge is probably the bet. Yeah, you see the chat's going edge, defensive end, edge. So there you go. Goodness sakes. Tinker says, I guess that I could hit the like button. I forget sometimes. Yeah, it's free. It's pretty easy. Just hit like. Pretty simple. Okay, let's get on to the next one. To the guy that didn't want it to be a Trey channel. I'm sorry. Kyle Shanahan talked quarterbacks today, which means we've got to talk about his comments. You might want to just plug your ears, but keep the chat going. You can talk in there, but just plug your ears, earmuffs. You don't want to hear the next part. All right. So basically they asked him if the plan was to play Trey. And Shanahan says, that's why we looked at trading Jimmy, because we obviously believe that Trey can be the starter and we're ready to do that. But if we can't upgrade our team in another way, we're not just going to get rid of a good quarterback because we have other quarterbacks on the roster. Quarterbacks are really hard to come by. Some teams don't have any at all. And the fact that we have 3 that we're happy with, that is a good thing. Okay. All right. We brought Trey in here to eventually be that. And I think that will be sooner rather than later. But when Jimmy gets his surgery and we can't upgrade our team by getting some good picks until people feel good about that surgery, I'm all right with that. We're not just going to get rid of him to get rid of him. Jimmy is a good player that we all really like as a person and as a teammate. And we're going to wait and see whatever helps the Niners the most. That was a lot. Shanahan does that. You ask him a question and he goes crazy. Let's dissect this. What were your thoughts when you heard this?
I mean, once again, going back to Shanahan not being a gaslighter and, really wants to tell the truth with still wanting to play the game. This is much different from what he spoke about last season, right? When it came to Trey. And I think he gave a lot if you read between the lines. The reason why Jimmy isn't traded is because teams aren't comfortable with his shoulder. Like, he's saying that in black and white, right? When you read it back, it's even more clear than when you heard it. This is Trey's team now. They're not going to get, they do believe they're going to get something for Jimmy. And look, I've been getting killed on Twitter for some of these takes that I've been saying, and they're not even takes, Jesse. And I do want to mention, I know you're lighting the fire sometimes, even though I know you're doing it as a joke, but your minions be coming after me too. But if you pay any attention to Shanahan and Lynch, none of this is surprising. Like, they value Jimmy. All of their success in their 6 years here have been tied to Jimmy being healthy or not. They see his value not only with play on the field, which we both question, but the intangibles off the field, what he could do to a locker room. And I believe everything that they're saying in the sense that there is value for Jimmy. And the way that I like putting it, because I know people are going to look at his play and just like trash him, but we're seeing firsthand right now, Jesse, with a guy like Baker Mayfield and what's going on in Arizona with Kyler Murray. They're dealing with just like a fraction of the type of drama that Jimmy had to deal with his whole tenure here. He was being shopped all the time. They were flirting with quarterbacks publicly every single season he's been here, and we kind of went through that. Never requested a trade, never said anything publicly. It was never an issue. And I think teams that have the type of talent that the 49ers have on their squad that could carry a guy like Jimmy, even if he's not playing that well. That was funny. I think they look at Jimmy and say, if we have a leader like this, if we have this type of mentality that never gets too high, never gets too low, we have the type of team where we could win in spite of a bad game from Jimmy, but we want him to just stabilize the room and make this more of a winning culture, because Jimmy does create that. He's been in winning organizations everywhere he's been, whether it be behind Tom Brady in New England or with the 49ers. I think there's value in that. And I believe that they think that they're going to keep him till a team starts realizing that and desperately needs a quarterback. And Jimmy's the guy that they're going to trade for. And I do believe when Jimmy's shoulder, when he could show he could throw the ball, that there are going to be teams that are going to want him, whether it be a team like the Panthers or, some team that maybe their quarterback goes down due to injuries or something else, that, Jimmy could come in and keep them still competitive.
All right. Here's what I'll say is that I took a lot from what Shanahan said today. Like, this quote, I think should put everybody at ease. Trey Lance is the starter. Like, other than saying Trey Lance is our starter, this is as close as you can get to saying it without saying it. And if you don't believe it, just look at what was being talked about last year, how he was talking about Trey Lance, right? What he was saying about Trey Lance versus what he's already saying about Trey Lance. Now, I do question, why is he ready now versus, I don't know, week 18, right? Like, all of a sudden he's ready. What happened in a month of an offseason that made him so ready that he's not ready now, or wasn't ready then? So that's a little bizarre, but I will say this. It's very clear that they want to roll with Trey. That's awesome news. Now, as far as the trading Jimmy, and so what I would say as fans, we shouldn't argue about who the starter is going to be, barring an injury or something like that. Knock on wood. Trey's the guy. Like, Trey is going to be the starter. So let's put all that aside. If you're going to have frustration, you still can have frustration that Jimmy's on the team. But I wouldn't go crazy until probably week 1. And the reason I say that is because they have multiple outs. To Suneil's point, they may find a trade partner. Maybe. I don't know about that, but they also could cut Jimmy when he's healthy, save the full $25 million, do what they could have done last year, which is roll that $25 million over, and that now becomes $50 million next year. Because the way that it works is whatever you are under the cap in an individual year, you get that money on top of whatever the cap is. So, for example, let's say the cap is $200 million next year, right? They stayed 25 million under this year. They would basically get $225 million to play with on top of coming in under the cap because they save that money. So you're basically doubling up on whatever it is that you don't spend. I wish they would have done that last year. I talked about that being a benefit. They didn't do it. They still can do that this year. So there are multiple ways that they can still win this situation. I like what he said, though, that they don't, at least the way that they're looking at it, they don't see free agents that are going to make this team good enough to override whatever they're trying to do with Jimmy. Okay. So they do. They value Jimmy. They clearly value Jimmy. That's why he's still on the roster. You can't tell me that he's not worth anything. Sure, they weren't offered anything, but that's because you value him too much. If you go to a team and say, hey, 49ers, what would it take to get Jimmy? Oh, we're thinking 2 seconds. Okay. Any wiggle room? Nope. That's what he's worth to us. All right. Well, have a great day. Like, of course, you're not going to get an offer. Like, it's not going to happen. If I was going to come to you with 2/4, I'm not going to offer you anything and insult you if you just told me you're not budging. So, no, they didn't receive an official offer. That doesn't mean he has no value. It just means the value that other teams have him at versus what the 49ers have him at are two completely different things. And they should be, because the man is injured again. He stays injured. He's very expensive. The league just doesn't value him the same. Now, can they get more? Let's say the Panthers do need a quarterback. Can they get more if Jimmy's healthy? Sure. How much more? I'm not sure, because who were the Panthers competing against? Unless a team does have an injury, which maybe that happens. Let's assume that it doesn't, though. You can't predict injury. The Panthers are bidding against themselves. So they're going to say, all right, we're cool. Like, just cut him. We know you have to cut him, or that's the plan. You want to save the money. If you want to keep him, great. Not a big deal, but we're not giving up a ton of assets. There's nobody bidding against us. It is what it is. We're moving on. So I don't know for sure if there is a ton of value there or if that value goes way up, but there are scenarios that they can still save face here, in my opinion, whether it is cutting or trading him after he gets healthy. All right, let me go. Got a couple super chats. Aaron always showing love over at 49ers First Takes. Go show him some love. Subscribe to him. He says, I feel like I'm trapped in a dream, like the movie of Inception with this Jimmy G trash, and I cannot wake up. Like I said, rest easy, Aaron. Trey is the starter. The 49ers aren't making any grave mistakes until he's on the roster in week 1. Which would be a mistake. We can talk about that. It certainly would be a mistake, even if he's the backup. But I got to believe that Shanahan's smarter than that. I don't fully trust him based off the major errors they've made since 2017 on the quarterback position. But I know that he realizes it would be an issue. So let's hope that they're smart enough to figure this out. Abu Marco says, you don't let a Pro Bowl left guard that never misses a game and a defensive tackle who is number 1 in the league versus the run see how to see how your top draft picks do. Keep them. No such thing as too much depth in the trenches. I'm going to push back a little bit. So let's talk about Jones first, right? DJ Jones is a great player. I love DJ Jones. But DJ Jones was a rotational player. He played 49% of the snaps, even with Kinlaw out, 49% of the snaps. So with Kinlaw being there, it stands to reason that that number could go down. Yeah. Also, he got paid $10 million a year. So are you willing to pay somebody $10 million knowing that they've got all these big contracts on the roster for a rotational player? I don't think that would be a good decision either. Plus, let's not forget, Kocurek can kind of make diamonds out of anybody. I'm pretty sure that whoever they bring in, Ridgeway is it that they brought in? I'm sure he'll be fine, right? So to me, no, that one for sure you do not do. Now, I will hear the argument for Laken Tomlinson. Absolutely. Would I have preferred that Jimmy was off this roster if it meant bringing back Laken? Sure. Yeah, I can get behind that. But the 49ers clearly do not see it that way. So if they don't see it that way, if they're not willing to get rid of Jimmy, then there really truly is not money there to bring back Laken Tomlinson at $14 million a year, unless they structure it in a crazy way, which also kicks the can down the road, knowing that big contracts like Trent Williams, Kittle, who just got pushed back, Armstead, obviously you're going to re-sign Bosa and Debo. Yeah,
Warner.
you're going to have to let somebody go. Unfortunately, it was the left guard in this situation. Good player. He made the Pro Bowl off a technicality, so he's not a true Pro Bowl guard, but he is certainly better for sure than anything else we've seen. Doesn't mean that Banks can't get there. Doesn't mean that Banks doesn't show out, but we don't know what Banks is. So I think you make some fair points. I just want to show you the other side of the coin. Appreciate both of you for donating. Let me show you some love real quick, and then we'll get back on topic. All right, I just said a lot, Suneil. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
No, I agree. I mean, obviously, there, a lot of times when we're playing GM in the as a fan base, we're not looking too far in the future. We're not seeing what the numbers are as far as the balance sheet, profit, loss, all that kind of stuff. There's strategic decisions that needed to be made. And especially when you have the type of talent that they had in Aaron Banks and Kinlaw sitting there, you look at where you can pinch the pennies and where you need to spend the money. And they made a strategic decision that we're going to take that money that we would have to pay for Tomlinson and a Jones. And because we have these options, we're going to use that money elsewhere where maybe we don't have as much depth to sign that starter that we know is going to be good.
Bruneel, not to be confused with Suneil, says Matthew isn't good enough, Gilmore isn't good enough, Julio, Jarvis aren't good enough. Listen, Matthew was my free agent crush. He was the first guy I talked about. He was the one that I wanted the 49ers to get. I still would love if the 49ers got him. I think it would be a hell of an upgrade. Certainly something that I would look into. I would love to have Matthew for sure. I don't know about any of the other guys personally, but Matthew for sure. But the 49ers just don't see it that way. So, we've got to also – I want to look at it from both sides, right? To be fair, I want to look at it from both sides. It doesn't mean I agree when I'm giving the 49ers side of things, but I can understand a little bit where they are coming from. In their opinion, there isn't an upgrade worth foregoing whatever they think they can get for Jimmy, whether that's cutting him and rolling the money over, whether that's trading him, whether that's him being on the team, godforsaken, as a backup. It is not worth it to the 49ers for whatever reason. So this kind of is what it is. We got to deal with it. Okay. Let's move on to this final quote. All right. I got to move this closer because I'm old and my eyes don't work. It says, won't having Jimmy around mess with Trey, which I think is a great question, by the way, because this is the argument that I've made is that, and this is why I say he has to be gone by week 1. We'll talk about it in full here, but Shanahan does address it, and I like the way that he did so. He says, you've got to make sure that you're not hindering his development, talking about Trey. Trey's working his tail off. He knows how I feel about him. He knows what our expectations are for him, and I think that he's got a lot of respect for Jimmy. But the situation is clear. Again, the situation is clear. This is key. And we were trying to make a move to add some draft picks, and we were pretty close to it. Then the surgery ended up getting basically in the way of things. I think that Trey will understand all that I haven't had to talk to him about, but I think if it makes sense at all for these guys, Trey's not insecure. I think that the situation makes sense. There's nothing sneaky going on about it, and he's confident. He's going to come in and focus on playing football and focus on beating out Whoever he has to, whatever, whether it's Garoppolo or Nate, he's going to come in at the best that he can be. That's a lot. What do you think?
I mean, like this is what I think, Jesse, is last year I came out here and I think it was on this show or one of your shows, whether it be Hammer and Nails or this, and I said, we will never hear any kind of Jimmy Garoppolo slander from this point on because everything is about building up Jimmy Garoppolo as a trade asset. And last year, obviously, they didn't trade him. And up until this point, they haven't traded him yet. But I don't think that out of just the kindness of Kyle Shanahan's heart when it comes to Jimmy, he's not going to sit there and be like, Jimmy is a backup. The fact that he's even mentioned Nate Sudfeld as a potential starter over Trey Lance kind of lets you know that he's just saying these things to be politically correct. But Trey's the guy, and he's not talking about anything as far as how this would hurt Jimmy. He's strictly talking about this from the aspect of Trey starting, how this isn't going to affect Trey. Trey's not insecure. Trey knows everything that we're talking about. He's not even talking about Jimmy has a chance to win the starting position. Like he was saying last year, right? It was straight out. There's no way a rookie's going to beat Jimmy Garoppolo. Now it's like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be tough to beat, but he's not saying that Trey Lance won't be able to beat him like he said last year. So this is just this is Trey's job. I know some people are saying Trey's job to lose. I don't think there's a way he could lose this, barring injury. He is the starter, and Jimmy is either gonna be a backup at worst case scenario, or most likely gonna be cut or traded. Traded, obviously, best case scenario. So that's what I took from it. He's still all behind Trey, and Trey knows what the situation is, and it's just business at this point, how much they could get for Jimmy.
Yeah, Javier wants to know what's going on with Alfredo Gutierrez. He's on the roster. I mean, he signed a future tender, so he's going to be there, at least competing for a spot. We'll see if he makes the team or what happens, but he's there. Like, he'll be a part of things. Yeah, so listen, again, without saying that Trey's the starter, like, how much clearer can he be? You have to remember that the 49ers aren't going to come out and name a starter. They have no obligation to, not right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating, right? As fans, we just want to know, is Trey the starter? What's going on? What's going on with Jimmy? What were the trade offers? We would love to know all those things. Maybe there will be a great documentary about it someday. But for right now, Jimmy's on this roster, and they are trying to sell him to whoever at this point. So they're not going to talk bad, to your point. And you did. I think that was on Hammer and Nails that you came on and said that. I specifically remember you talking about that, how we're not going to hear a bad thing about Jimmy, and we really haven't. However, there were some little things that were thrown in. I don't have the quotes to, but Shanahan did mention, hey, we didn't know about the surgery. Like,
right.
that was not discussed, right? He kind of throws him under the bus there. Then he talks about communication with Jimmy. Well, Jimmy kind of unplugs after the season. This is what he does. We don't really talk, but I talk to Trey all the time. Like, these little things are his way of showing you he's frustrated that Jimmy's still here, but they're dealing with it and they're going to work through it. Whatever that means, however long this drags out, what have you, I don't know. I don't think they truly know. I think they're going to try to figure it out, play it as it goes, but they're not going to just dog Jimmy, say Trey's our starter, Jimmy's out of here. They're not going to. They're just not. And quite frankly, they can't unless they're willing to cut him tomorrow. Because if they play that game and then decide to cut him once he gets healthy to not have to pay that injury guarantee, then there's going to be some sort of litigation and it'll turn into a mess. So they can't talk about cutting Jimmy as an option. They're just not going to, because then it will seem premeditated. Jimmy and his team will come out and say, well, we had teams that we could have signed with, but now nobody wants a quarterback because the 49ers held us hostage for 3 extra months. They can't do that. Like, that's against league rules. That's against everything that the league does and stands for. So with that being said, this is about as close as you're going to get to saying that Trey's the guy. We're figuring things out with Jimmy, and it kind of is what it is at this point. So, again, to me, there was a lot more that came out of today from Shanahan than what came out of yesterday from Lynch. I was all over the media for asking trash follow-up questions yesterday, not asking the right questions. Now, Shanahan does talk more. You can see these quotes are very long. He goes off on tangents, but that's great. You don't have to press him a lot of the times. He's going to be very honest, to where John Lynch, being the GM, he likes to talk in circles, but you've got to press him and ask him more questions. So I think things went very well today. I think the media did a good job of asking questions. Shanahan obliged them, and it was a much better day. I think we got a lot of answers. We should feel good about where this team is headed. And there's still, 9 draft picks ahead of this team that we can talk about. So, we'll see. But for right now, we learned, in my opinion, a lot today.
I agree.
All right, let's get into this next topic here. Actually, let's do this one. Let's do this one. All right. Since we were just kind of talking about it and I alluded to the draft, what does free agency tell us about the draft, Mr. Suneil?
Yeah, and this was something that I just thought was kind of interesting because for the most part, the 49ers are going into the draft without any glaring weak positions where a starter is needed, minus safety, I would say, right? So they still need to figure out who's going to play safety alongside Jimmy Ward, whether that's somebody that's already on the roster or if they're going to sign a free agent, because there's still a lot of safeties out there that I think they can get, or are they going to go the draft? The other positions, though, I was seeing that are maybe positions that they could upgrade or just they have like 5 or 6 receivers on the roster right now, Jesse, but only 4 of them are guys that are going to make the squad. The rest are guys that were their practice squad last season or guys that are just they're taking a flyer on. And then so for me, I look at it, and obviously their first pick in the draft is a second-round pick. We were saying that they're going to do best player available, truly. But the more I think about it, the 49ers with their top picks don't go best player available. They always go best player available at a specific need that they're looking to target. So if we're going just based off of their history, I think what we've seen in the free agency kind of lets us know what they're going to do with that first pick. And I think it's going to be best player available at either edge, wide receiver, or safety. And that's just based off of where they haven't signed depth yet, and what they haven't necessarily upgraded quite yet. They always go after defensive line. We know that's just their MO. And then the fact that they haven't signed any real wide receiver depth or a safety, to me, that's what I think we can tell is going to happen. I know a lot of people want to say offensive line, but I do think that they're going to go maybe later on in the draft, maybe their 3rd, 4th round and onwards, after a center, interior offensive lineman, stuff like that. But for that second pick, my money's on one of those 3 positions gets drafted.
Yeah, interesting. Wide receiver. I'm with you on the safety and the edge. By the way, if you just mock or look at the way things fall, edge is pretty deep, as is safety. And a lot of really good guys are clustered anywhere from that 50 to 90 spot in both those positions, which, by the way, happen to be positions of need for the 49ers. So I agree with you. I think safety or edge makes the most sense for that number 2 spot. As far as the rest of the draft goes, yeah, I do. I think that they're going to draft a receiver at some point. I could see them also drafting a running back late, some offensive linemen, maybe a nickel corner to compete. We'll see where they go, but they're telling you they have starting positions open on this team right now that they're clearly looking to fill through the draft, right? And they're going to do that or look to do that. So unless Tart miraculously gets signed or another starting caliber safety miraculously gets signed before, you pretty much know which route that they're going to go there, right? If they don't sign a starting caliber edge, unless they think Ebukam can be that guy. Now, he did come on strong at the end of the year. Maybe he can be, or maybe they think he can be.
Jordan Willis.
But
Jordan Willis.
yeah, well, Willis is good. By the way, speaking of special teams hero, I mean, we loaded up, or the 49ers, I should say, not we. 49ers loaded up on special teams. Willis is a big part of that. I mean, he's the reason that the 49ers beat the Packers, right? So, yes, Willis is going to play a big part. He's certainly, at the very least, going to be a rotational piece. I just feel like opposite of Bosa, they have three guys that can be rotational pieces, but they don't have that locked in number one pure wide nine pass rusher to bring in. And so we'll see how it plays out. I think that that's somewhere that they can go in the draft as well. But there are certainly some spots at play, and all teams do this. They're going to show you through free agency what they plan on doing in the draft, right? But I think it's a good spot to be in because, like I said, there's a lot of talent coming in that second pick at multiple spots of need. And I think the 49ers are going to be in a good spot, whichever direction they decide to go with that first pick that they have. And they'll be able to make a major upgrade and probably get a starter, a day one starter immediately at one of those positions in need.
Can I tell you why I threw wide receiver in there?
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So the reason why I threw wide receiver in there, Jesse, is I think, they talked about it. I don't know if you have it up, but Debo's getting signed, right? Debo's getting a long-term extension. And we all know that's going to be decent money, if not super, super big money.
Well, to be fair, Shanahan says that he would recommend it. Yeah.
Right. And hey, right. And but they also have a stud on there named Brandon Ayuk, who we all believe is going to blow up this season and do really well with Trey. Now, the good thing about Brandon Ayuk, he was a first-round pick, so they will have that fifth-year option with him. But a receiver playing on their fifth-year option is kind of disrespectful. We've seen how that plays out. Usually, if you make him play that fifth year without an extension, he's gone, right? We saw that with Devontae Adams, saw that with Tyreek or whatever. They're going to have to make a decision with him without really any options behind him to replace him, right? Because Jennings is not the same type of caliber of player that Ayuk is. So just like they did with quarterback, right? They went up when the quarterback was more deep versus if they waited till this year where it wasn't very deep, right? This is another year where the receivers are really, really good this year. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen projections. Usually there's always receivers, but this is like a notably deep wide receiver draft where you can get really good wide receivers in the second round. I don't know if next season is going to be like that as far as with the draft. So this might be something where they eye that future move, just like they did with Trey, just like they did with Kinlaw, stuff like that. That's why I threw it in there, because this team does do a pretty good job foreshadowing issues, and instead of waiting till they just become like glaring holes,
Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, I think that there certainly is a need for wide receiver. Like, they only have so many on the team, so certainly they do need it. I just don't know if they're going to spend their very, very first pick. To me, that's a luxury move to where they clearly need starting caliber guys right now. So if they go wide receiver, that truly would be them saying, we just went best player available, period. Right? Like, we thought this was the best player. That's what we're doing. So I think they're going to go best player available at a position of need. I think a starting caliber player, or a spot where they don't have a clear starter, that's a more pressing need than wide receiver. But I do think that they're going to draft a receiver somewhere. They need to, quite frankly.
I think they need to
draft a receiver.
Draft too.
And they may draft and they may pick one up immediately as an undrafted guy, right? So in fact, they may really like somebody so much that is undrafted that they just pick him with that Mr. Irrelevant pick and say, hey, well, listen, now we got some rights to you. So we actually drafted you, right? We're not going to take a chance on you going to another team or another team calling you. We want you. We're going to make it happen. So I could see that scenario for sure. And quite frankly, they could use a couple of wide receivers. So before we get out of here, I do want to hit one more topic. And I think this is a really, really good topic because I see this play out on social media on a regular basis. And it's does the perception of Trey Lance and his success hinder on the team winning or losing? What do you think?
Yeah, so this kind of spawned from a question that I asked this week. I woke up on Sunday very inquisitive, Jesse. I don't know if you noticed by, my Twitter feed. So I just threw some questions out there. For some reason, if you're part of all 49ers SI, Jesse, and you ask a question, that means that's your take, according to people. So, I was getting, obviously there was like the people that were blasting me. And then the question was, if Trey Lance plays the whole season and they don't make it to the NFC Championship game, would you second guess Jimmy, the 49ers getting rid of Jimmy? And it basically is kind of tied into this question, like, how much does the team's success under Lance as the starting quarterback play into whether or not you believe he had a successful year, right? And refreshingly, the majority of the comments were no, like even if this team doesn't get as far as we did with Jimmy last season, that's still better that we start Trey. He's a young quarterback. There's going to be growing pains. It's a new season, all this kind of stuff. And that was nice to see because, I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe people would be like, if Trey doesn't make the playoffs, then, Shanahan and Lynch should be fired because they let go of Jimmy, who, and all these type of things. But I think as a fan base, based off of just that question, which got a lot of responses and in there, and I think that most people are understanding of that there may not be as much team success due to just a quarterback learning how to play the position or his first chance at a full year starter. Now, for me personally, I do think that the team is going to have just as much success with Jimmy, not necessarily maybe make it as far because obviously each year is different, but I do think this team is still going to be a double-digit win team. I think they're going to make the playoffs. And I think they're going to be a very competitive team year long because I don't think that there's going to be much of a drop off when it comes to Trey than what Jimmy played. However, I also know that there's going to be some times where Trey isn't playing the greatest. I mean, I rewatched the Houston game, Jesse, and there were some moments in there where it was like, Trey's making the wrong read, or he didn't throw the best ball, or, he didn't get rid of the ball as quick as Jimmy may have. So there's definitely growing pains there, but just the type of ceiling that he has is what you need out of your quarterback. Like I was watching the Colin Cowherd show and he had Joel Klatt there and they made a really great point. They said, no longer can you go after the guy that has the highest floor. You have to go after the guy that has the highest ceiling because of the way what you're seeing these teams that are winning on a consistent basis. You have to be able to take your team to this out of world level to even compete. And we saw it Buffalo versus Kansas City, where both of those two quarterbacks went unreal and still it led to, Buffalo not being able to make it. We saw what Matt Stafford was able to do with Cup in the Super Bowl. Like you got to go after a guy's ceiling and not just focus on the floor. And maybe Jimmy's floor is set, but Trey's ceiling is what we need to be looking at. And we need to see him play and have him develop so we could actually see it come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you got a great response. I don't know if everybody's social media feed would get that same response. I can tell you that I know that there is a big chunk of this fan base that looks at strictly wins and losses, and that's how they determine success. Whether that's right or wrong, that's how they do it, right? I don't think that the team success should play into it all what the perception of Lance is, unless he plays like dog water. If he plays like dog water, of course, like that's a whole different story, right? But if we see that he's getting better, he's progressing like he did last year from Arizona to the Texans game, or even in the first half of the Texans game to the second half, if we see that progression and we see glimpses of that talent, that's all we need. Like that's all we need to see. And if he can play at a level that is good enough to keep the team competitive, then there shouldn't be any frustration. But people have to understand teams are so different from one year to the next. You have injuries, you have schedule differences, you have coaching turnovers, you have player turnover. There is no way that you can go back and mimic the 2021 season, insert Trey Lance, and see what happens. It's a whole different season. The problems from last year are not going to be the problems for this year, right? There is so much that goes into this. So just saying, yeah, the team has to win in order for me to give Trey any credit, that is the wrong way to look at it. Complete wrong way to look at it. To your point, Josh Allen, I think, is a great example of that. I think the Stafford and Goff swap should be a great example of that. So I think most fans are probably logical, right? But there are certainly a group of this fan base that's like, nope, Jimmy made us win. We didn't win without Jimmy. If Jimmy's not here, we're not winning. And Trey's a bust if we don't win. That fan base does exist. And I just think that that's a crappy way to really look at things. But they're there. I promise you, they are there. Castro says, Raider fan, by the way, see you in Vegas, hopefully. Yeah, maybe. I want to see the Niners versus Raiders in the Super Bowl. That would be awesome, man. If the Niners and the Raiders were in the Super Bowl, it would be great. I'm sure it would be killer, literally, because those fan bases do not play around. That would be a scary thought, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I think it would be cool. Maybe it's different now that the team's in Vegas. I'm curious to see how that game goes. I will be in Vegas for that game, so hopefully it's not too crazy. Hopefully everybody's cool with each other and we can have a good time. But
you haven't seen that stadium, huh? You haven't seen that stadium.
I've driven past it. Like, okay. I've been in Vegas when they were building it, but I haven't.
Oh, you haven't seen it fully?
Seen it.
It looks like Wakanda from the outside, bro. It looks like Wakanda from the outside. Like, that stadium is probably the sickest stadium. And I went to Dallas Stadium when they first opened up. I saw, the big Jumbotron and all that. I was there, year one when the Cowboys played the 49ers. I went to that game. This is the sickest stadium that I've ever seen. I haven't been inside, but just from the outside, it literally looks like Wakanda. And I can't wait to, be at a game in that stadium.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it looks like a spaceship, like something from outer space landed. It's pretty cool. I think it's and I've heard that the amenities inside are amazing as well. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you there, Castro, with many other 49er fans. Again, if you have not subscribed here, we are so close to making 5,000. I think we can get there by week's end. Make sure you subscribe, hit that like button if you've not done so already. Make sure you subscribe to Suneil's channel. The link is in the description.
I'm 4 away from 800, man. I'm at 796.
No. You're not 4 away. As soon as this show's over, you're going to be over 800 because the people in the chat are going to show you love. I believe in them. Appreciate each and every one of you. Let me end on giving you some love, Castro, and then we'll end the broadcast. All right, y'all. Peace.